like maybe stages of post-globalization or neo-globalization, four stages, three stages. Try to remember those stages because that can come as an important question. Number two, you might have a question on a long question on how in post-global society or in post-global world, populism becomes a very important phenomena or a striking phenomena. And to hold on to this populist idea, new media or new social media, otherwise referred to as new civil society, also becomes an engaging factor. For instance, आज की डेट पे whenever we say of government, this is a global phenomenon. Earlier, in the Cold War period, what was the trend of government? During the Cold War period, that is 1940s to 1990s, whenever we spoke of government, government used to be something far away, isn't it? It was never readily available. It was something which was aloof. The government was quote unquote an ivory tower. যখন আমরা আইভরি টাওয়ার শব্দ ইউজ করি তখন আমরা এই মেন্টাল মেকআপটা আমরা আগে থেকে ধরে নিই কি এই আইভরি টাওয়ারটা খুব দূরে আমাদের কাছে। ফর এক্সাম্পল, যখন রাজা প্রজা সিস্টেম হতো, রিপাবলিক সিস্টেম এবং প্রিন্সলি স্টেট সিস্টেম, রাজা কি খুব তোমার কাছে থাকতো? রাজার গভর্নমেন্ট যদি তোমার কিছু কমপ্লেন করা হতো তুমি কোথায় যেতে পারো? তুমি রাজার চোখ উঠে তুমি কি আমার এটা প্রবলেম, একটা বাড়িতে জল আসছে না, এরকম বলতে পারতো রাজা? না। তুমি একটা ভিলেজ লেভেলে রাজার রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভকে তুমি ধরতে পারো। সেম সিস্টেম ছিল পোস্ট 1940s to 1990s government system. Globally was government which is very far away. It was never a government which is immediate. It was never a government which is there at a touch of a button. The government was far away. That's why we used to say, Delhi बहुत दूर है, isn't it? Statement कभी सुना होगा ना? अरे क्या करें, पॉलिटिक्स चेंज करोगे वोट से? दिल्ली बहुत दूर है भाई. That means you cannot do much. Delhi is very far away. यहाँ कैपिटल को चिल्लाते रहो कोई फायदा नहीं है, दिल्ली में कोई नहीं सुनता. मतलब गवर्नमेंट एंड राजधानी एंड राज प्रशासन is centralized at a particular geographical space and it is not going to reach the Aam Janata. So therefore, government and governance was top bottom, very hierarchical. At the top was Indira Gandhi or Nehru, lots of parliamentarians, lots of bureaucracy, lots of red tapeism, lots of party lobbying and license raj, and you have to break several glass ceilings. एक नेता को मिलने के लिए कितने पापड़ बेलने पड़ते? आई मीन नेता जो चुना हुआ है और पॉलिटिकल पावर में, जो चुना नहीं है, जो ओपोजिशन में है, उनको तो तुम हरदम मिल सकते, दे आर एक्सेसिबल, whereas an elected representative is inaccessible, because with elected representatives comes the other paraphernalia of security and securitization. For instance, the moment you become a MLA, आपका टीम सिक्योरिटी हो जाएगा. The moment you become a MP or member of parliament, category X, Y, Z, B, C, बहुत सारे आते हैं. आपके उस लेवल में ब्यूरोक्रेटिक एक कवच हो जाता है. So you become unaccessible or inaccessible to people. So during the 1940s and 1990s, this trend was global. That government is very far away. And that was one of the reasons why in public administration and in new public administration also, we focused on the desirability of transparency, accountability, and participatory reach of people into governance. There is a catchphrase: people in governance, electorate politics having an effect in government. So government or governance, दोनों में participation and transparency is essential. That was So 1940s to 1990s कितने साल हो रहे? 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. लगभग 60 साल, 60 years globally, we were told that democracy will be successful if and when we are able to cross that thin line between government and its citizens. Because what really matters is in terms of citizenship and subject. Because if you are not a citizen, then you cannot say that Indian government मुझे affect नहीं करता. Indian government will affect you if you are an Indian citizen. If you are not a citizen of India, then the government cannot affect you directly, isn't it? And that's why the Cold War era was talking in terms of nationalization of space, ethnic territoriality. It was talking in terms of citizenship rights. It was talking in terms of more securitization of boundaries. It was talking in terms of providing as much as possible security, service, food, protection, shelter to a select group of people whom that country could call its citizens. Otherwise, it could also call them subjects if they were people who were refugees taking shelter in their land. So, in that sense, you have citizenship and subject debate come within this framework. Now, when we say that this period the government was far away, that was initial. By 1970s to 1990s, in South Asia, if we take the case of India, we had something called the desired aspect or issue in terms of Panchayati Raj system. The 73rd and the 74th interventions in constitutional programs by the 1990s in India introduced newer forms of more participatory nature of panchayat systems. So panchayat systems from the 70s till about the 90s also had an evolution. So earlier in the 1970s, panchayat was representing a village, but it was a gendered panchayat because panchayat में 5 जन पुरुष होते थे, महिलाएं का वहाँ आरक्षण नहीं था. Whereas in the 1990s, it came forward with some kind of reservation for women, and that was the time when leadership in South Asia as well as leadership globally also changed in many places. So traditional societies like India, which were more culturally conservative, socially reserved, were quote unquote called or classified as traditional societies by Fredericks and others. Fredericks' prismatic society, you remember? If you had political science, you will remember. I'm using a lot of political science recap, so those who have political science, either as past course or honors, will be able to understand. In prismatic model of and his prismatic Sana model, in both models, you would find that as the desire for development goes on. So in the case of Panchayati Raj also, in the context of India, the desire was to develop Panchayati Raj into a more democratic frontier, or as an experience of democracy in South Asia. So they wanted to say that democracy is not a Western idea or a Western institution. Rather, democracy is also having elements of localized spaces. Hamara version भी democracy है. So Panchayat was shown as Hamara version of democracy. But the problem with Panchayat in 70s and 80s was that it was gendered. It was male-centric, male-specific, and all decision was done through men. So, thanks to global movements of feminism and women's studies, 1970s, feminism is coming in, first wave, second wave, third wave, and it's becoming globally strong in America. That same idea was taken by Armand Warburg, Fredericks, and others, whoever were studying development. They were looking at development and participation through lenses of multiplicity. Gender was one of them. And the United Nations organization and the entire, post-Bretton Woods movement, wherein you have world funding agencies come up also, gender became one of the nomenclatures in looking at things which were defined as development goals. So by 1970s to 80s end, women's participation became a point which globally was felt as essential for bringing about development in traditional societies. So by 1990s, we spoke in terms of reservation of seats. By the end of 1990s, close to 2000s, panchayats across India started adopting reservation methods. So that's how you had sarpanchas in village become women. And many times initially, critics said that it was not working because I remember when I was I had just completed my master's in 2003 and I had got a job in an NGO and I was placed in Jharkhand. So we were doing a lot of survey in Jharkhand. So at that time, sarpanch mahilaएं आने लगी थी. We spoke to them and they did not want to talk to us, telling that हमें कुछ नहीं पता, हम तो इसी बार इलेक्टेड होके आए हैं, आप जो पूछना है मेरे पति को पूछना. So sarpanch was there as the sarpanchni was there. They would call her sarpanchni because she's a woman, and her husband would be the sarpanch, even though he's not elected. And same trend goes for if you want to understand this, you can take a parallel with Lalu Prasad Yadav and with Rabari Devi. When Rabari Devi took on the chief minister's position initially, did she know how to do X, Y, Z of politics? No. Everything was remote controlled by Lalu. But once Lalu went to jail, here we had Rabari. Huh? They came, but then they came a little later because they were quite young when this happened. But the mother evolved. Rabari Devi evolved as a politician. She even became chief minister, and she continued to reign her hold. She continued to hold the system in order. In the absence of a father figure like Lalu Prasad or a husband figure like Lalu Prasad. Yes. So you would see, you have lots of other, examples to see how exactly it must have happened when sarpanch system or village pradhans became women. You can take the case of this OTT series Panchayat. If you watched it, Neena Gupta's character is having the same problem which I am talking in terms of. So this happened in the 1990s, 2000s, early that period. Post now, today you go to every village, sarpanch woman is natural. And they decide very decisively what they want and how they want things to be. So in the 90s, this became the gender dynamics or the paradox which were seen as something different. And it was also seen as a chance given to women to come into politics. And many even saw a green light telling that अभी महिलाएं आ रही हैं तो politics का सफाया हो जाएगा, politics में corruption चला जाएगा. But that never happened. With this introduction of women into politics, total in India, what we saw was the rise of big scams, Jayalalitha, for example, or Mayawati's elephants. So, or Mayawati's 100 shoes, or diamond earrings. So many. So you also saw that corruption is something which goes everywhere. Corruption is gender blind. So it doesn't mean that if you're a woman as a politician, you will be free from corruption. We also saw the case of violences. We also saw violence not just in India, but also in other parts of the globe. For example, Sri Lanka. Women leaders, or Bangladesh, women leaders, but violence upscale. So the logic of binary distinction or connection between a particular woman as Nari means peace, Shakti, was also thrown out of the window. Because it seemed to tell us that irrespective of gender, these dynamics of corruption, power, absolute power, boils down to many other things, and that your gender doesn't matter. And that also became a critique for the entry or the vantage point of the third gender into South Asian politics. Third gender, like the Hijra community, began to say that आपने मर्दों को चांस दिया, इतना करप्शन मिला, महिलाओं को दिया, ये मिला, अब हमको आप दीजिए चांस, हमें इलेक्शन. So in Madhya Pradesh and in places central in India. You had the third gender come as participants in electoral politics as well, showcasing themselves as leaders which could be promising a lot of hope. Because politics is a lot about hope and hope selling. Because when I come to you and I say that मुझे वोट करेगा, आपके बच्चे को पूरा फ्री स्कूलिंग मिलेगा MBBS का, 5 लाख मिलेगा अगर MBBS साइंस पढ़ता है. So I'm giving you a hope. I'm giving you a promise. And this hope and this promise is what development politics throughout the 40s and 90s was trying to churn. Because why did we want to have development? What was so attractive about development? ऐसा क्या था development में कि हम सब development की भीड़ में हम चले, with the Cold War of Russia and the Cold War wave bloc of United States. What was it so attractive? Because they were selling us hope as a promise. They said that अगर आप develop होते हैं, आपका ऐसा हो जाएगा society. उसमें gender disparities या gender vulnerabilities जो है, it will get erased. There will be more transparency if you do this kind of political system, etc. But if you look at the history, or if you look critically at this long history of 60 years of implementation of democratic exercise as well as development culture in traditional third world societies or South Asia in particular, and Southeast Asia by that extension, we would realize that these promises remained promises to a large extent because there was something called, we were trying to develop something superficially from the outside. It was taken and replanted. So there was something called politicization of democracy, democratization of caste, as well as language. People became more and more conscious of their cultural properties. And this again goes against the grain of globalization, because this is also the period wherein globalization is setting in, isn't it? Slowly it is coming up, because globalization is telling you no boundaries. But here with democracy, with post Second World War, releasing of Cold War period, we are also talking in terms of more boundaries and more security. So in a way, globalization came as a ready-made replacement of this program of development to a certain extent, because it was trying to provide a new world of hopefulness, wherein without borders you would be going across spaces. It became a world like in Tagore's world of nationalism, wherein the boundaries did not matter. You became a global citizen. You became a cosmopolitan. So Tagore's idea of without borders, हम दुनिया के संतान. But if that is taken as दुनिया के संतान, today in 2022, in 2022, you had New Zealand's Prime Minister who said that if you think that you are a citizen of the world, then you are mistaken, you belong nowhere. Because when you say you are a citizen, you either have to be of Bangladesh or Pakistan or else. You cannot say that I'm 70% India, 70% Nepal. ऐसा citizenship नहीं होता. So it has to be very clear about it, that you are there or you are not there. It cannot be something in between. It is not gender studies, it is not queer studies, it's not LGBT studies that you can say that I am somewhere in between, I'm navigating myself. No. It's either you are pregnant or you are not. You cannot say that I'm a little pregnant. There is nothing called
comment. You can't be fully pregnant. No,
Where
you
did
can't
he
be
say
partially pregnant. There was something, the same thing like which you said it was heavy. Oh yeah, you can't be partially pregnant. You cannot be partly pregnant. Yeah,
I've been telling this to my students ever since I've been teaching them development, because I don't have a better example than this. Because you have to be either fully in a particular position.
Yes.
When you talk in terms of citizenship, you cannot say that I'm 60% Nepal, 10% Bangladesh, and another is whatever, and a little bit of global. Western England. So citizenship regimes and all. Otherwise, why will we have passport? Today we say that passport is not essential. Even if passport is not essential in, let's say, France, Sweden, Switzerland, It is still essential. They have the Scandinavian visa, fine, but passport का color क्या है? European passport बोल के तो कुछ है नहीं, है क्या? French passport है, Swedish है, Switzerland का passport है, सबका अलग अलग ही है. मतलब हम उतने भी एक नहीं. We are same, but a little different. So we are not equal. We are same, but different. So in that sense, this particular portion talks a lot about these political institutions. Because if we look at, and I had a talk with Paula Man, ये political institution और culture में, if I end up doing all of South Asia, all of Southeast Asia, होगा खत्म नहीं होगा. Plus तुम लोग के लिए भी exam के through से, it's not wise. So what I'll do is, एक तो India का example I've been giving you in terms of democracy and all. I will take up Nepal once because nobody has done Nepal. So we will look at Nepal's transition in terms of political development in the Cold War period, and then I'll take one country from Southeast Asia. I'll see concept, teacher to concept, and now when I look at every teacher has done something, somebody has done. I was trying to do Japan yesterday, but somebody has done Japan also. So I don't have anything to do because when they have taught Japan, they have taught this particular portion, a little bit of history background. So I'll just keep myself on board and I'll focus on Nepal. I think that's Nepal and Bhutan, if you all allow. I think those are the two countries which will be easier for us. And tomorrow, what I'll do is, tomorrow at what time can we meet?
Sir, can you take just a suggestion, online class because exams are near? It will be easier for us a little bit because...
So, online classes में ना explanation ऐसा नहीं होता है. वो बैठ करके ना I have to explain like this and I find myself very restricted. इतने में I cannot explain things. I actually need to move in the classroom to explain you. You should listen to my lecture when I'm moving in the class. The lecture becomes more effective. I myself, I know that I'm giving my best. Whereas if you restrict me in that screen, I cannot. I get very tired. But then we can't help it. That's also true. Exam nazik aa raha hai yahan, travel.
Internal is also there.
তাহলে আমি একটা কাজ করব আজকে এটা আমি এই ধরনের অফলাইন করে দিচ্ছি হ্যাঁ দিস উইল গো লিটল বিট মোর উইল এক্সটেন্ড ইট লিটল जितना सकते हैं বিকজ এরপর তো তোমাদের কিছু ক্লাস নেই না বাড়িতেই যেতে হবে আর তো কিছু আর এত রোদ্রুতে কি করবে ইটস নট নাইস বাড়ি থেকে বেকার তোমরা ডিস্টার্ব করবে ওখানে বাড়িতে দে আর স্লিপিং এন্ড অল আফটার হ্যাভিং দে আর রিল্যাক্সিং ইউ গো এন্ড ডিস্টার্ব দ্য কলিং বেল বেকার में नो डिस्टर्ब करो पूरा बैठ लो यहाँ तो आज तो एक्सटेंड कर लेते हैं I'll take one online class maybe tomorrow okay because I don't want to but what I'll do is if not tomorrow the online class we will do it because tomorrow I'll be going to office so what I'll do is I'll scan the materials it'll be soft copy I'll send those soft copies to you because that will be the fastest method of doing it. Otherwise, if you wait for hard copies, Xerox, it will not reach out. You can print it on your own. So soft copies, I'll get it done. I'll convert it to soft copies tomorrow. Okay? So I'll do that for you tomorrow. We'll just listen to what is going to come for your tomorrow's e-documents, whatever you will have. And you can read that, and that can be the backdrop. So, for India, if you look at political culture, and when we say political culture, political development, these are terms coined by Development Studies Group, who tried to study third world countries, or third world properties, or third world elements, or third world nests, or backward nests, in other words. I've already explained this last time. So, they wanted to study, especially from American point of view. It was the American perspective. कि चलो देखते हैं कि जंगली देशों लोग बैकवर्ड देश जंगली देश इनके यहाँ political culture रखा है democracy कैसा है. So it was a lab kind of experiment. So South Asia and Southeast Asia became the labs for understanding politics. And those scientists who were studying those labs were all located in America and in countries like Sweden. You have a very famous book, The Asian Drama. It's written by whom? The Asian Drama. Gunnar Myrdal. Gunnar Myrdal is Swedish. He was a prime minister. He's a political scientist, winner of Nobel Prize. His son also won the Nobel. They are the only father-son duo who actually got Nobel at different point of time. Now, this Myrdal came forward with understanding Asia and development in Asia. And he called this development politics that we have in Asia, the kind of license Raj, regime Raj, the kind of settings that we see, the government picture that we described just now, that the government is very far away. Mantri hota hai, mantri ka bahut bureaucracy hota hai, zone-wise support, zone-wise securitization. Participants cannot reach the mantri because the mantri is too centralized and it's geographically far away. And to top it down, to reach the government, one needs to pay money at different channels or become powerfully connected in different channels. If you go to Delhi, a trend in Delhi is that anybody who will talk to you, if they want to show that they are powerful, is that tu janta nahi hai main kaun. In Delhi, you will have this statement. If you can just go anytime, कहीं साइकिल धक्का हो गया या तुमने कहीं साइकिल को धक्का दे दिया, किसी को तुमने गिरा दिया या कहीं झगड़ा हो गया, रेस्टोरेंट में कुछ हो गया, बार में कुछ हो गया, anyway, तुम जानते नहीं हो मैं कौन. So that means everybody is connected to somewhere. Here also होगा ना, कैलकाटा में भी. Every other person, you will see that somebody who's politically connected with it. Dijanish नाम की. They'll ask, you know who I am? क्या लगे boss आप कौन है? It's like, you have not seen them कहीं जाना नहीं, but they know that they are very powerful. So that kind of idea, Myrdal says, it is a part and parcel of the Asian drama. This is a drama ही तो हुआ ना. कौन पहचानता है उसको? झगड़ा आ गया कहीं से जानते नहीं. अगर कृष्णामी है वो. अगर क्या you are making your own house. अपना कंपाउंड में, अपना घर में, वहाँ कोई ब्रिक गिरी गया, उसको सीमेंट का बालू बन जाएगा. ना आधे दुकान থেকে কেন কেন. আমরা তো সাপ্লায়ার মেটেরিয়াল কাম লাইক কাট মানি সিন্ডিকেট এই সবগুলো যে ব্যাপার আছে এটা আমরা দেখছি কিন্তু এটা আগে থেকে ছিল 1960s 70s এর Myrdal বলেছে এটা a part and parcel of the Asian drama, and that's why the term of the title of the book was. So these kind of issues were taken up by Sidney Verba as well as Huntington. All of them tried to study development discourse in South Asia. And they found that these were the connectabilities of how democracy was being, casticized in a way, and caste was also becoming democratized. If you remember Rashdi Kothari and others. So democracy became a lens through which you know that हमारा नेता कैसा होगा, हरिजन का नेता हरिजन जैसा होगा. So it was no longer a case of capacity or leadership or decision making. It was a case of अरे राजपूत है, राजपूत को जिताएंगे. Same thing happens with your reality shows also, isn't it? Whether Prashant Tamang knows how to sing or not, we know it. But in Darjeeling and in other places, हम लोग बस नेपाली पहले बस देखा जिताना ही है. So even from Nepal, India में आकर के वोट करते थे. Here now also you get all the reality shows program. You have this competition. अरे केरला का शेर versus Bengal का शेर. I don't know whether Kerala में शेर है कि नहीं. Okay, so it's a Bengal शेर. They have this kind of, they pit and pin one geography with other, isn't it? They always do that. So this entire program is also very much ethnically tensed, and is a part and parcel of reality shows democratization also. Because in reality show also we're talking in terms of votes each time. So here, when we are doing panchayat elections or when we are doing state level elections, we are electing not on the basis of the person's ability to be a leader, rather we are voting in terms of caste representation. Rajput, Bhumihar, Brahman, Dalit, Muslim, lots of other criteria come up. Now this itself means that the whole engagement and purpose of democracy becomes something else. So democracy is supposed to give you a space to become a part and parcel, isn't it? But here we see that democracy in fact makes you more restrictive, more conservative. Because at the end, how are you voting? Dalit, Rajput, Mahila. So in Mahila, in this one we can still consider gender mein aa jata. We can still say that okay, it's fine. But when we vote in terms of ethnic communities, language, religion, it becomes difficult. The purpose of democracy falls flat. That's one. Also, the language of politics also changes. 1940s to 1990s. How has the language of politics changed? Take the case of India. Initially, leadership, which were there, would speak very, very fluent English, isn't it? Look at Rajiv Gandhi. Look at I.K. Gujral. All of them will try to speak in English, even if they don't know. Deve Gowda, they'll try to speak in English. If you're a national leader, you will try to speak in English. Because the focus on centralization of English and the control of power in terms of a language called English. English became a language of power, whereas Hindi became a language of politics during this period. If you look at studies on language in India, then you will come across this particular phenomenon, wherein English became the language of power, access to power, as well as a closeness to success. Whereas if you knew Hindi, you could be politically successful, politically closed. If you knew other languages, you would be successful only in Telangana or maybe in Tamil Nadu or maybe in Bengal. So the vernaculars did not have that kind of strength. But after 1990s, after mandalization of politics and communalization of parties, what happened was language became a little thorny issue. Vernaculars started evolving their spaces. So in political programs, political leadership, within the parliament also, people started speaking more and more in local languages. In fact, oath-taking ceremonies, when mantris come and take their oath, earlier, everybody used to try and speak in English or in Hindi. Today, any language in the 8th schedule is considered as a comfortable language to be used within the parliament for oath-taking exercises. And people are becoming very proud that they are taking oath in their own language, isn't it? So that means that elements of traditionalism is also continuing to hold on with the whole idea of democracy. Democracy is supposed to make you more and more, free. It's supposed to make you more and more liberal. But here we see in South Asia, with democratic interventions, people are also becoming more and more conservative. And this is going, quote unquote, very strongly with the entire phenomena of globalization. Post 1990s, when we look at this period, because this chapter ends in 1990s. 1990s to this side, we will see that ethnic movements or ethnic assertions become more and more louder with globalized media intervention. If you look at names of anybody in India born after 2000, you would find that their names are more classical. And this is not just for Hindus or for Muslims. This is for other ethnic communities like the Mizos also. Names have become more and more sophisticated, more and more Sanskritized. So earlier in the 70s, 80s, you would find names like Rinki, Tinky, Priya, Pooja. Tina. Very modern sounding names. And guy's name will be Rahul, Raj. Today you look at names of babies. What are the names? Swarnali, Swarnalika, Arshia, Anup. You see that the names have become more and more, Sanskritic. You can also see the case of televised programs, televisions, during this period in South Asia. What used to be the name of the hero in television? Rahul Raj in the 90s. Today, the name is more sophisticated. It's very, very sophisticated. In fact, it could be as hilarious as Saraswati Chandra. It's not a back, and the person whose name is Saraswati Chandra is in fact not someone who's wearing dhoti or someone who's illiterate. It's a very suited booted type of person, very handsome, like a god, suited booted, and their name will be like this. Their name will be as archaic as possible. So it's like going to Europe or going to France and trying to locate a girl whose name is Nefertiti. Go to France and try and find out whose name is Nefertiti. Nobody's name is Nefertiti because it's a Purana Zamane ke naam koi aaj kar nahi. But in India, we are trying to look at more and more old names, more and more prachin. So this prachinta that we are trying to identify in India is very much a product of post-global phenomena and the interventions of globalization and a new scale. We are becoming more and more prachin. Because there is also this tension, which Mrital and others in development studies scholars have already mentioned in the 70s, that there is, with these developmental programs, there is also this idea that healthcare system in South Asia, etc., is very traditional. Traditional healthcare system, Ayurveda, Unani, ये सबसे कोई hodgepodge है, ये सबसे कोई ठीक नहीं होता. You become good only if you have booster dose, you have some pill. So it's more in terms of allopathy. With that kind of framework, which was given to us in the 70s, that pox hatana hai, injection, polio injection, dawai, ye, wo, lot of medication in terms of allopathic medicines or allopathic consumption of healthcare system. By the 90s and by 2000, we came to realize the ill effects of such healthcare systems. So suddenly, you have brands such as Colgate. Again, these are multinational brands. It's not an Indian brand. You can take the case of Close-Up. Again, multinational brands. They'll say that Close-Up will come, or maybe Colgate will come and say that हमारे टूथपेस्ट में नीम याद है आपकी ग्रैंडमदर जब आपके दांत दर्द होते थे तो नीम इस्तेमाल इसमें इस साबुन में हल्दी है और
we see the political arena, like you said about all kind of modern medicines. Now we have a Ministry of Ayush.
Yes. So look at the reason why there is an investment in the Ministry of Ayush is to recover the national past of that heritage of Ayurveda and Unani medicines.
We have institutes which are coming up.
Yes.
Giving specialized studies
Yes.
in
That's
Ayurveda.
right. So the need for this, why did it come up? It came up because there was a resistance as well as a counter narration to globalized markets of healthcare system, which spoke so much in terms of a pill being able to be sufficient to cure you from all your problems. So South Asia and Southeast Asia also started inventing or started relocating or identifying these lost heritages of its own healthcare system. So in that sense, there are multiple issues from satellite television's intervention into our drawing rooms to the zooming of World War in the 90s. In the 90s, with Star TV and with CNN, which came forward. You all were not born during that time, so you don't know. In the 90s, I was in class 5. Yeah, class 5. So I have grown up seeing that. So the first Gulf War, which happened, Saddam Hussein, others. That was televised. They showed it on TV, and you had CNN and others, the reporters, Christian Amanpour, who won the award for the most brave telecasting of a war on television. Christian Amanpour, CNN's Christian Amanpour, she came forward with these kind of visuals from Tel Aviv and other places within the Gulf, and it was shown live, and we were very happy that देखो war तो दूर में अब तो आज war हम TV में देखें. So our consumption of news also changed with this. So a lot of things happened during this 60 years of time in South Asia, in particular in India. And I'll stop with this particular portion because from here I will take you a little to Nepal. And with Nepal, what happened is Nepal opened up to world politics in the 1960s. Before that, it was a closed Himalayan country. It continued itself to be very centralized, very monarchical, and it did not want to experiment much with the outside world. So in that sense, Nepal, like Bhutan, are very late entrants into this development rat race. They came in the 60s and 70s. Both these countries were mountain monarchies or the Himalayan monarchies. One was a Hindu Rashtra, the other was a Buddhist Rashtra. Both had monarchs, both had patriarchies, and both survived on intense internal palace feuds. Just as there were internal palace feuds within Bhutan, within Nepal also there were palace feuds between the Ranas and
The Rana regime.
between the Rana regime and
Shah,
the Shah.
it was a Shah, then the Rana
Yeah.
took over.
So you had this complications. So the monarchy was not a single monarchy, there were multiple monarchies. Every district was represented by a monarch in Nepal. And Nepal by the 60s realized that it cannot be a Shangri-La. It cannot remain very aloof from world intervention. It should come into the picture, into the light. So after the fall of the Ranas, when the Shahs came back, Prithviraj Shah, his descendants who came to power, Mahendra and Pati, they tried to picture or they tried to provide Nepal a platform, a centrality. They said that Nepal is important because it is central to South Asia and it is central to Trans-Himalayas. In fact, India is a big nation, big democracy with a large geography, but it is not the center of South Asia. Nepal claimed that centrality for itself. It said that we are the ones which is central to Asia or Asianism or Asian ideas. Because the whole notion of Asianism also talks in terms of peace and security. And what other country can boast of pride than Nepal? Because Nepal is the birthplace of Gautam Buddha. So they said that it's the birthplace of Buddhism, and therefore it deserves to be known as the zone of peace and security. So this zone of peace and security became the bone of contention between India and Nepal. India came forward with an answer, telling that you cannot claim this coveted position of centrality in terms of zone of peace and security. Just on the logic that Buddha was born. India said that you need to be corrected because Siddhartha the prince was born in Lumbini in Nepal. That is a historical fact. But Buddha attained his nirvana in Bodh Gaya, isn't it? Under the Bodhi tree. And that Gaya is in India. So he became a Buddha in India. He may be born as Siddhartha, but he became Buddha in India. And Bodh ka prachar went from India to across the globe, not from Nepal to across the globe. So therefore, your claims on zone of peace and security stands. That was the argument given by India. So India said zone of peace and centrality for the entire Southeast Asia comes to no other than India. The logic was good also. Because when you say that you become a sage, or when you become, somebody sannyas lever, যখন আমি sannyas নেব, আমি কি আমার মা বাবার আমার আমি কি আমার জনই রাখতে পারবো? না। আমি কি আমার গোত্র এটা বলতে পারবো? আমার তো sannyas হওয়ার পরে তো গোত্র becomes different. My guru's gotra becomes my gotra. I lose everything because I'm reborn. It's a new birth. In fact, many people who go into this process of becoming a sannyas also make sure that they practice that Mera Pishte Janam ka Shraad wahan ho gaya. They do some kind of thing that I'm dead there. I'm reborn here. This is my new life. I don't have any connection with anybody. All the world is my brother and sister. Everybody is my dad. My parents are no special. They are particular. They are not special. So in that sense, Nepal and India's tensions have continued to grow. In fact, the monarchy has always suspected India. Even though the RSS and the Vishwa Hindu Parishad have tried on and on by taking money from outside, because a lot of donations come from outside, from people of Indian origins, donations come into mandir constructions, etc. A lot of money goes into Nepal, because Nepal again is considered to be the land where Hinduism was protected from 1860, Treaty of Sigoli, to let's say 2015, when the new constitution was adopted. Till that time, Nepal was a Hindu Rashtra. But after 2015, with the new constitution, no longer a Hindu Rashtra. So Nepal lost its Hindu Rashtra privilege also, and so did it lose its funding mechanisms via Vishwa Hindu Parishad and RSS. A lot of networking was there. But today again, Modi, because he wants to revive that factor of trust, we need to have friends which are trustful of ourselves. Because in foreign policy relations, in foreign policies or in foreign relations, we talk in terms of rational actor pragmatism. We talk in terms of bureaucratic actor pragmatism. We talk in terms of global factors, or little factors and big factors. So Nepal, we know that it supports China, it supports Pakistan, and that is not favorably disposed towards India. But we still need to keep Nepal in our good network, because we cannot just throw away one particular person and say that we will not talk to them. Because Nepal is represented by a particular leadership in a particular political system or a regime. That regime need not be there for a lifetime. The new incumbent will show a different picture of relations. That is what has happened after Lipule, isn't it? After Kalapan. Oli was talking too much in terms of India, and he was boasting in terms of muscularity and challenging Modi's muscularity with Nepalese muscularity. But today, with the replacement of Modi by Dahar, it's again different networking altogether. So in that sense, Nepal and India's relations are also not so fine-tuned, though there are lots of shared heritages. We have shared connections of the Hindu texts, scriptures, etc. Because whenever Hindu texts and scriptures were in trouble, we always brought it down to Nepal for safekeeping. And whenever Nepal failed to keep it safe, it took it up to Trans-Himalayas, to Tibet. And that's how many of our Tibetan respondents and Tibetan monks have been largely responsible for preserving Indian artifacts, such as the manuscripts related with Buddha, the manuscripts related with certain Rajputana kingdoms. Lots of Sanskritic valuable dharohar have been kept safe by these safekeeper guards that we have in our neighborhood. And people like Rahul Sakitayan, he had gone all the way to Tibet to retrieve these artifacts. And today we have many of them. We read it in our libraries, in our archives, we are able to access it, etc. It's thanks to our neighbors, Nepal and Tibet. They have saved a lot. And that is one of the reasons why the connectivity through spiritual connections is also so strong. If you look at Puri, in Puri you have a particular system of priests who come from Nepal. In Nepal's Pashupatinath, you have a particular priest who comes from Puri and a particular priest who comes from Tamil Nadu. So you have these interconnections of rituality also. So Modi has said that he wants to revive this Ram Connect, or what is referred to as the connections between spiritual elements which are shared between Nepal, India, and larger transshumanists. So the exercise is very novel. It tries to bring about neighborhood in its first platform by increasing neighborhood connectivity. And that is something which has happened post 1990s, with our consciousness becoming more and more ethnic, more and more conservative, more and more pristine. So in that sense, there is an entire history which talks in terms of the changing political culture and the changing political dynamics in South Asia from 1940 till 2015, in between 1990 as a very important mark area. And in this framework, we can also see Nepal. So Nepal is something which is not always a favorable partner. Traditionally, they have helped us preserve India's lost heritages. They helped India in its securitization during the colonial period. They helped India in multiple fund and development projects, such as initial dams construction in Nepal. Everything was done by India. Nepal's Tribhuvan University, the largest public university, was made by India. Nepal's airport was made by India. Nepal's hydel projects, everything. But in return, Nepal also provided India with a large force of, man force. It helped us with human resources, with the army, as well as with other nitty-gritty logistics throughout India. And thanks to the Treaty of Friendship, 1950s, this was possible. Because it spoke in terms of a borderless world between India and Nepal. So what globalization was promising in terms of a borderless world, India and Nepal were already applying it in the 1950s, when globalization had not promised that kind of world as a possible world. So today in 2022, whenever there's a tension between India and Nepal, we again go back to 1950s Treaty of Friendship, which allows for the free flow of movements between these two countries for the advantage of their citizens, not for the advantage of the political parties in operation. Okay, so that is the backdrop. Isi backdrop me, you'll be getting the material, wherein the material talks of how democracy was changed in Nepal and how monarchy was changed in Nepal and how democracy was initiated through Panchayati Raj systems, but it failed up till 2000s when the Maowadi movement in Nepal came forward. And the Maowadi movement also was sponsored by China and through India also. So it had both connections. And the prince or the monarchs in Nepal were suspicious of both China and India. And in particular India, because almost all leadership in Nepal had their initial training as students in universities and in colleges from India, in both cities of Calcutta and Delhi. So whether we talk in terms of Koirala, who stayed for a large time in Nepal, in Calcutta, in Scottish Church, to Koirala in Delhi, to Prachanda in Calcutta, to Delhi. So Scottish Church College Journal, this is a very, very important college in our Bengal history in terms of South Asia's politics. Because Scottish Church, even though it's a minority Christian college, it somehow instills in students, or it allows that space for students to come up with some kind of radical propositions. You can see examples from Bose. Bose also had a connection with Scottish Church. He also had it with presidency. So that is what the material we're talking about. Now, it's a very long history, and I've tried to condense it in 1 hour some minutes. So we'll repeat it in online classes and I'll try to explain what is there in the material. You should be able to answer, but thankfully ऐसा इतना अच्छा सिस्टम नहीं है कि हर एक टीचर से एक एक क्वेश्चन आ रहा है. मेरे पोर्शन से अगर तुम आंसर नहीं कर सकते तो डजंट मैटर. जिसके पोर्शन से आंसर कर सकते हो वो आंसर करो. डोंट गो बाय अनुप सर का आंसर करना है, नहीं. यू विल गो बाय कौन सा आंसर में मुझे मैक्सिमम मार्क्स मिलेगा. ओके, दैट इज इट. एंड नेवर गो फॉर अ क्वेश्चन which is single question. Whenever I set a question, I always break it into 3 parts or 2 parts. Because your big question is 15 mark, you know? That means if the question can be 10 plus 5, otherwise if the question can be 8 plus 7, that kind of break-up question is easier. Because out of 8, you can get, if the answer is good, you can get, let's say 7. Out of 7, yeah, 6. 7 or 6, kitna ho? 13 out of 15. That's a very, very good mark. But if you write a quota answer for 15, getting 13 is a dream. It will be a dream. So be smart what to answer. Don't go by ये टीचर ने पढ़ाया ये आंसर करना, नहीं, जरूरी नहीं है. What is important for you is तुम्हारा मार्क्स कैसे इंक्रीज करेंगे. Your marks are the priority, not what the teacher has taught or what is taught. So look at it like that. And sometimes it will happen that you have forgotten the answer. If you have forgotten the answer, then just look at those questions where you have a little bit of safety zone, like where you can explain a larger history. Those kind of questions. Larger history will help you fetch at least out of 7, 5 or maybe 4. That 4 is better than not having answer at all. What's the date today?
27.
अनन्या नहीं है. अंकित यहाँ अंकिता प्रमाणिक, अनिशा
Present, sir.
नाथ, विदिशा, विक्रम, विपाशा दास, विपाशा रॉय, देवद्रित, देवस्मिता बाला, देवस्मिता चैटर्जी, दिव्या कांता, दिव्यप्रिया, दोलन,
Present, sir.
विजय घोष,
বিয়ের আগে আমার নগুলো যেমন মহারা গেছিল আমার চার পাঁচটা প্রতি 2-3টে পড়ি 3টে
गुरली, जगदात्री, जया,
ওই তো আগের বছর 2000
केया, मधुपर्णा, ऋतिका, प्रीति,
আবার মায়ের কাজ হতে
प्रियंका चैटर्जी,
সবাই গেছে আমরা ভোরবেলা উঠে উঠে বসে পড়তাম।
पूजा कर,
একটা মানুষ
पूजा मजुमदार,
আর বাবা সকলেই তখন ভালো আছে আমরা পাড়ার সব
पुष्पिता, पुष्पिता दास, रीमा, रिंकी, ऋतिका, ऋत्विका दत्ता रॉय, रोमित, शाश्वत, शतद्रु, इसके बाद आता आयुष नहीं है, स्नेशिश, स्नेशिश बाद सोनिया, श्रोवना, श्रावणा, श्रोवती, हाँ, श्रोवना,
सर स्लिप के
शुभना, सुष्मिता, सुष्मिता दास, सुष्मिता नास्कर, are you all born in 1994? No.
कहना सर
After Sushmita sir, everybody became
না স্যার আমি যেখানে গেছি সেখানে এরকম সুস্মিতার পড়তে আমি কখনো একা হইনি যে একা স্যার দেখো শুধু সুস্মিতা করে
Urmi, Arifa, Autry. I find it very difficult Autry का pronounce करना क्योंकि Autry सबका अलग pronunciation होता है इंग्लिश में तो Autry ही होता है
हाँ बंगाली का इसका स्टाइल अलग है
इकरा Jaya Banerjee Jaya Are there two Jayas in the class?
Yes.
One year. Kana is there. Olumi. Rima. Saraswati.
ভাই আমিও খালি ভাই না খাটলে পরীক্ষায় ওই
सरस्वती पिछले क्लास तुम मेरे क्लास में थी ना लास्ट क्लास हाँ वो मतलब वो 21 तारीख का क्लास ये देख आयन किया सब तनिषा देवस्मिता
প্রেজেন্ট স্যার
अतिया
তুমি আজকে ভালো করছো না মানে কালকে কি ভালো করো ডেভেলপমেন্ট নিজেকে ডেভেলপ করতে হবে
आप जो
তিনশো আস্তে আস্তে
স্পেসিফিক কিছু হতে পারে কিন্তু it depends because from one particular topic one teacher will be allowed to give just one question and সেই one question যে আমরা দেব ওখানে তাদের scrutiny board they'll have another panel they'll compare both and they'll pick and choose कौन सा question अच्छा लगता है. So if I tell you that इसमें prepare करके करो, that might be also like doing a killing act. If you get it, India, Nepal, Cold War context, specifically if it is that, then I think the question would be in terms of India's developmental initiatives in Nepal vis-a-vis superpower interventions in Nepal. Because just as in South Asia, India is trying to do developmental work in Nepal, America, Britain, France, all these superpowers are also trying to put a foothold in Nepal. Because Nepal is central. If they are located, if United States is located in Nepal through an NGO or through a funding organization, it can keep an eye on Nepal and India, both sides. Isn't it? So that is one of the reasons why Nepal has got maximum number of funding agencies and maximum number of NGOs. All NGOs sponsored by either USA or by Germany or by UK. Because they want a space to keep a track in terms of geopolitical navigation. So that is one portion. But I think they'll give you straight questions. They'll ask, what has been the developmental or political culture of Nepal during the period 1947 to 1990? Straight question. अच्छा पॉइंट केन लिखे दो
सर জানি না অনার্সের রুলসটা পয়েন্ট নিয়ে কেটে দিয়েছে
আমার অনার্সের রুল ছিল যে কোনো পয়েন্ট লেখা যাবে না কি পার্ট আনসার করতে হবে বডি একটা বডি ছিল
আপনি প্যারা করে লিখতে পারেন পাশে ডট বা স্কয়ার দিতে পারেন
যেটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট তার নিচে আন্ডারলাইন করে দিন যেগুলো মানে মেন আর কি তার নিচে আর কি আন্ডারলাইন করে কিন্তু আন্ডারলাইন
Sir, the topic that you have given it for internal features of post-globalization and neo-globalization. So from this topic, what can be the not question aspect on which I can work for PPT? That's what I'm asking. মানে ফিচার হলে তো খুব একদম স্পেসিফিক হয়ে যাচ্ছে না।
You can take case of topic is very vast. You can use hashtag movements. Students বলেন যাদবপুরে ওরা রক্ষা করে না that's part of the populist movement করে
আগের বারে একটা প্যানিক দিয়েছিল
পয়েন্ট করে করে লিখতে হবে না ভেতরে মানে সেটা একই আমার টাইম
পয়েন্ট লেখা টিচারের জন্য সুবিধা কারণ আমরা দেখতে পারি কি কি পয়েন্ট আছে
মানে একই থাকলে যে লাইনের আগে লিখতে নাও পারি পয়েন্ট ছিল ডিফারেন্ট জানি ডিফারেন্ট
কনসেপ্ট একই আছে বাট টাইমিংটা আলাদা টাইমিংটা করতে হবে
বলে যে আমি ইন্ট্রোডাকশন করেছি সোসাইটি আমাদের সোসাইটি ইন্ট্রোডাকশন দিয়ে তারপর কি আমাদের টপিকে পোস্ট বা গ্লোবালাইজেশনে ঢুকে তারপরে কংগ্রেস রেজিম বা ভোটারদের ওটা দিয়ে কনফিউজ করতে হবে কারণ স্লাইড আছে
but I'm telling the safest আমি দু ম্যাটেরিয়াল দিয়েছি পোস্ট গ্লোবালাইজেশন নিউ গ্লোবালাইজেশন just read both
আমি যেটা বলেছি আপনি যেটা বলেছেন প্যানিক
একটা হচ্ছে এখানে সবুজ আছে সবুজটা তোমরা দেখো ওখান থেকে শর্ট নোটস আছে এটাও করে দিচ্ছি এ থেকে আর কি?
সবুজ মেটেরিয়ালটা থেকে স্বর্ণ
Sir, black and white xerox করেছি আমরা. We won't be able to see the way which is
কিন্তু
সবুজ.
এই মেটেরিয়াল তো আছে তো আর given in soft copy also
দাঁড়িয়ে
अरे ऊपर में बहुत डेकोरेशन दिया हुआ है अरे बैकग्राउंड का आर्टिकल है वो रशियन लेडी का कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ पोस्ट ग्लोबलाइजेशन वो वाला ये जो है पीडीएफ
Sir, you have given us in hard copy actually.
इसका सॉफ्ट कॉपी भी है मैं आई डिडंट गिव यू मैम सो आई थॉट गिव मैम यस And from the other one, you get no. Yeah, you read that one for thinking that one is short.
এটা শর্ট নোট
बाप रे इतना बुरा लग गया ना तो पेज नंबर भी गिनना मालूम चला पेज नंबर ही बुरा So where's the other one?
মজা পেয়ে গেছি মজা পেয়ে গেছি
Read the entire thing. This thing is very important.
আমি তো করছি না আমি কারো করে করছিস না হচ্ছে
Populist movement post globalization.
কত পেয়েছে কালার পরে কি হবে ভালোই আছে এরপরে শেষ হয়ে যাবে আর কমে যাবে
দাঁড়াবো. আরে আর ও কি দেবে স্যার? Yes, sir.
You take the photograph is fine, but please don't circulate it
No, sir.
in any of the class places.
No, sir.
Otherwise, the question will be totally changed.
no sir
Don't.
But you use the head with the question. That portion is important.
The portions you have picked, we are just taking that part only.
পাঠিয়ে দেবো
আরে দেবস্মিতা পাঠিয়ে দেবে দেখো আমাকে আমাকে মেসেজ করিস কেউ গ্রুপে মেসেজ করবি না তাই তোমার টোটাল ইগনোর করবি
পাঠাতে হবে না
আমি জানি এটা শর্ট নোট
আরে আমি বলে বলতে আমি পেয়ে যাবো
আমি বাড়ি গিয়ে বলে দেবো আমাকে মেসেজ করিস আমি বাড়ি গিয়ে সবাইকে সব বলে দেবো আমি ঠিক করেছে স্যার এটা না এটা বলেছে পুরো শর্ট নোট হ্যাঁ এটা কিছু মার্কস হবে কিছু দেয়নি একটাই টিক দিয়েছে
তাড়াতাড়ি ঢোকা
Not more than 6-7 pages. What do you wish to go ahead?
আরে বাইরে চলে আসলে রাজা স্যারের প্রশ্ন কি নেব সেটা ডিসকাস করা হবে আমি ওদেরকে বললাম তারপরে বললাম ক্লাসে ছিল কারণ আমরা আসছি
আচ্ছা স্যার আমাদের কোয়েশ্চেন মানবে আমি এটা বুঝতে পারছি না তোরা কোথা থেকে আসছিস হঠাৎ করে আমরা কোয়েশ্চেন দেবো প্রফেসররা সেটা অ্যাক্সেস করবে
না স্যার করেছি না
স্যার দিতে বলেছেন তাই আমরা একটা ভুল কনসেপ্ট ওরা বলেছে ওরা এটা Anisha, Shaita, madam.
ও আচ্ছা একটু দেখো তুমি এটা একটু ফাটে সত্যি বলছি এরা আমি রেখেছি এটা সাইকেল বানিয়ে বলতে পারো এটা
এমন কোনো কোর্সে কাজ করছি না যে সবাই করতে না পারে সবাই আরেকবার টেস্ট করে বলবি যে পিপিটিগুলো নিয়ে নিতে গ্রুপে আগে দিন যেগুলো করানো যায় পিপিটি আসেনি আমাদের গ্রুপে ও স্যারকে কল করতে হবে স্যারকে কল করতে
ট্রেনিং করে কোন কান্ট্রিজগুলো মানে দেওয়া